So this tweet of David Pearce's was brought to my attention by Calval in his antinatalist accelerationist group on Google+. So he made a link to the tweet and said, we're working on it. And I clicked on the link and I saw that David Pearce had said, a refusal to create more suffering is admirable, but selection pressure means antinatalism can't abolish suffering. And so I think what I said to him was that I'm hesitant to think so, but it seems that he doesn't really know what selection pressure means. And he replied to me, and his reply has since, I think, been deleted because I haven't been able to find it. He gave me a link to some selection pressure discussion that he had about David Benatar's book. And inside of that review of David Benatar's book was a link to a further essay on selection pressure. So I'm going to go into those and take a look at whether he really understands what selection pressure means and how it would apply to antinatalism. So inside of his review of Better Never to Have Been, he has a paragraph titled Selection Pressure and Radical Antinatalism. And where I've highlighted is where I personally find the only real discussion in this section of selection pressure. And that is where he says radical antinatalism as a recipe for human extinction will fail because any predisposition to share that bias will be weeded out. So this is the main point I want to make, and I don't know how long this video is going to be because this is really all I have to say about it, I think, is that he is assuming that the desire to reproduce is a gene that's going to be weeded out, and I just haven't seen any proof of that at all. I've got a lengthy video titled Procreative Urge where I'm arguing that we have a sexual urge, but there is no such thing as a procreative urge, and I've never seen any evidence provided to me by people I've discussed this with that there is a reproductive urge, so I can only say that there isn't. And he goes on to say there will always be selection pressure against its practitioners. Well, I got into a discussion about what selection pressure is in my Procreative Urge video, and I've had a personal experience with selection pressure. And selection pressure is an external pressure upon the reproduction of a species by something in the environment. So my personal experience with that is with the light brown apple moth pheromone spraying that was conducted in Monterey when I lived there. And that LBAM spraying was a way to reduce the reproduction of the light brown apple moth. So that's an example of selection pressure where something in the environment is introduced to affect the reproductive rates. So I'm still not seeing where David Pearce is really grasping the concept of selection pressure here. He goes on to say any predisposition not to have children or to adopt is genetically maladaptive. So again, I would just say it's not a gene, and I'll just leave it at that. So clicking on the link in that review of David Benatar's Better Never to Have Been leads to this, selection pressure in an age of quasi-immortality. And this is a very verbose, wordy, lengthy discussion here, so I've only highlighted the parts that I find relevant, and I think it would be a good idea if anyone else is interested in tackling this discussion to pick out other things in here. I'm just going to pick out these things that I've highlighted, where he says the urge to have one's own children can be extraordinarily strong. A majority of people will want to both stay forever young and to have children, because a lot of what he's talking about in here has to do with immortality. That's why I'm not highlighting a lot of it. So he's saying again that there's a procreative urge, and I just don't see that, and I don't see any discussion in that of selection pressure. He's just saying that it's a genetic urge to want to have children. He goes on to say a counter argument is that the urge to bear children is under genetic control, Again, I want to see proof of that. I haven't seen yet. And the predisposition to cheat and have children might be highly genetically adaptive. He's saying in a scenario where there was control over reproduction, it would become genetically adaptive to flout the norm and have children. So I just don't see any of this as very much discussion of selection pressure. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching.